I don't even know where to begin. Maybe it's best to start here. It didn't happen the way the movies show it. There were no flickering candle lights casting soft shadows. No delicate music playing in the background to build the tension. No slow, soulful moments where everything seems to happen in perfect synchrony. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't romantic. It was just silence. The kind of silence that burrows into your bones and stays there long after it should have left. That's what it was, silence that had weight, that felt like it was pressing in on me from all sides. And then there was the look. Have you ever had one of those moments when someone you never thought could look at you like that does? And it feels like something inside you cracks? Like you're not just seeing them, but you're seeing yourself. And in the worst way, it wasn't a touch. It wasn't a whisper. Just a long, unblinking stare that lasted too long. And in that gaze, I saw something that made my stomach turn. Something in me broke. Maybe it was the realization that, despite all the years, despite the promises we made to each other, something had changed. That stare said more than words ever could. Have you ever had a moment where you felt like you were watching yourself from the outside, as though you weren't even in control of your own body? I stood there, rooted to the spot, my mind screaming at me to turn around, to walk away, but my feet wouldn't move. It's like I was trapped in someone else's story, stuck in a place I didn't recognize, a place where I didn't belong. And I wasn't even sure how I had gotten there. I wasn't planning on anything that day. I wasn't dressed up. No carefully chosen outfit. No perfect makeup. I wasn't trying to look good or impress anyone. I was just there. But temptation doesn't care about lipstick, doesn't care about new clothes or how you present yourself to the world. It doesn't need an invitation. It waits for an opening. And God, I gave it one. I can't pinpoint when things started to unravel. It wasn't like the movies, where everything falls apart in one dramatic, loud moment.
No, it was more subtle than that.
Loneliness doesn't crash through the door all at once. It doesn't announce itself with a bang. It slinks in slowly, inch by inch, until one day, you realize it's filled every corner of your heart and your mind. Until one day, you look at yourself and wonder when you stopped feeling like you were actually living. Mark, well, he wasn't cruel. He wasn't mean or unkind. But he wasn't there. Not in the way I needed him to be. Always away for work, always out of reach. And when he was home, it was like he was a ghost in his own house. He slept in the guest room because, according to him, I snorted too much. But part of me couldn't help but wonder if that was just an excuse. Maybe he was avoiding the weight of me beside him. The weight of everything that had gone unspoken between us for so long. It's funny how things change without you realizing it. How over time, you stop noticing the cracks. You stop seeing the little fissures in the foundation of your life. You get so used to the quiet, the stillness, that you forget what it feels like to feel whole. I used to laugh without thinking. I used to smile because it felt good, because it was effortless.
But now,
every smile is a performance. Every laugh is carefully crafted. I practice the way my lips curl, the way my eyes light up, all to make sure they don't reveal too much. Because, deep down, I know that if anyone looks too closely, they'll see what I've been trying to hide. They'll see that I'm fading, that I'm not the person I once was. And yet, there I was, standing in that silent moment, waiting for something, anything, to shift. It all began innocently enough. Ethan and Claire, our neighbors, were like a breath of fresh air in a life that had, for far too long, become stale and predictable. They were young, vibrant, full of life in ways I had long forgotten. The energy they exuded was contagious, like a spark that could light up a room, a warmth that seeped into your bones even on the coldest nights. It was the kind of liveliness that felt so foreign to me, yet at the same time, it was like something I had been craving without even knowing. They invited us over for dinners, weekend barbecues in the backyard, and late-night bonfires when the crisp night air carried the scent of burning wood and laughter. The invitation itself was an act of kindness, a small gesture that somehow seemed to pierce through the walls I had built around myself. I accepted, almost without thinking, my curiosity outweighing any reservations I had. I wanted to be part of that warmth, to be surrounded by people who seemed so effortlessly happy, so free. Claire was the epitome of carefree joy. She had a laugh that bubbled up from deep within, an infectious kind of sound that made you smile, even if you didn't want to. Her energy was so bright, so alive, that it was hard not to be drawn in. She'd bring out the wine, always generous with her pours, and the conversation would flow as easily as the drink. There was an ease to everything about her, a grace that made me feel both comfortable and envious at the same time. And then there was Ethan, a quiet man, not as loud as Claire, but there was a steadiness to him that made his presence undeniable. He was often found at the grill, working the fire with a kind of focus that felt almost meditative. He would turn the meat with a precision that spoke of patience, of someone who wasn't in a rush, someone who didn't feel the need to fill the silence with unnecessary words. But it wasn't the quiet that drew me to him, it was the way he looked at Claire. His eyes would follow her movements, a soft smile on his lips, as if he were witnessing something too beautiful to take his gaze away from. It was the kind of look that didn't need to be spoken. It was an understanding, a silent communication that spoke volumes about their bond. But then, there were those moments when Ethan's gaze would shift, almost imperceptibly, to me. His eyes would linger just a beat longer than necessary, not in a way that made me uncomfortable, but in a way that made my heart skip a beat. It wasn't obvious, at least not to Claire. She was always so wrapped up in the energy of the moment, so full of life and laughter, that I don't think she ever noticed. But I did. I felt the weight of his gaze, the warmth that seemed to settle around me when his eyes met mine. It was the kind of look that made me feel like I mattered, like I was more than just someone's wife, more than just someone's mom. It was a look that made me feel seen, something I hadn't felt in years. I would laugh, pretend I hadn't noticed, and quickly redirect my attention. I told myself it was nothing more than harmless, friendly attention. It was just the way people were, I reasoned. After all, Ethan was married to Claire, and I was happily married to Jeff. There was no reason to read into it. But as time went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. The more time I spent around them, the more their presence felt transformative. When I stepped into their house, the air would shift. It wasn't just the warmth of the fire or the cozy lighting, it was something deeper. Ethan would pour my wine first, always with that same intense gaze, like I was the only one who mattered in that moment. There was no rush, no need to fill the silence. Just him, looking at me, as though the world outside of that room didn't exist. Claire would sit beside me, a little closer than most would. Her hand would brush mine, or her fingers would linger on my arm for just a second too long. It wasn't anything overt, nothing that would make anyone raise an eyebrow, but it was enough to make my heart beat a little faster. It was the kind of touch that felt more meaningful than it probably was. A subtle reminder that I was more than just a background character in my own life. It was the kind of touch that made me feel noticed,
Seen.
I hadn't realized just how badly I needed that until it was right in front of me. Until I started to crave that attention, that validation, like a flower reaching toward the sun after a long winter. I didn't want to admit it, though. I didn't want to face the fact that the only time I felt truly alive, truly noticed, was when I was in their presence. I told myself that it didn't mean anything, that it was just friendly, innocent fun. But the more I told myself that, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that something inside of me had shifted. I couldn't deny the way my body responded when Ethan's eyes lingered on me. I couldn't ignore the warmth that bloomed in my chest when Claire's hand brushed my arm. They weren't doing anything wrong, at least not in any overt way. But in some deep, unspoken part of me, I knew that I was responding to them, to their energy, in ways that I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. But I kept quiet. I didn't say anything.
I didn't ask.
I kept pretending, kept playing my role. The perfect wife, the doting mother, the woman who had everything she ever needed. I kept telling myself it was nothing, that I was just being foolish. But inside, something was awakening. A part of me that had been dormant for too long. a part that, for better or worse, needed to be seen. And then, one night, everything changed. It started like any other night. The kids had finally drifted off to sleep, their soft breathing filling the house with a peaceful rhythm. Jack, my youngest, was tucked in so tightly he looked like a little burrito, the faintest smile on his lips as he slept. The house felt warm, cozy. The kind of warmth that comes from both the crackling fire pit outside and the comfort of being surrounded by people you've known for years. The evening was winding down, but the laughter still lingered in the air, suspended in time like the smoke curling up from the fire. Claire, as always, was the center of attention. Her infectious energy was undeniable. Her laughter was like music, full of life and light, and when she smiled, it wasn't just her lips that moved, her whole face lit up, her eyes dancing with mischief. Tonight, though, it was a different kind of smile, a sly, playful grin that seemed to promise something just beyond the edge of what we all felt comfortable with. "We should play something a little more grown-up," she said, leaning back in her chair and locking eyes with me, a glint of challenge in her gaze. The words were harmless enough, the suggestion casual, but there was something in the way she said it. Something in her tone that made me shift uncomfortably in my seat. Everyone laughed, the sound of it rolling through the room like a shared inside joke. But even Mark, usually the one to laugh the loudest, held back just a little. His laugh was strained, like he didn't quite know what to make of Claire's comment. I smiled too, but I couldn't quite bring myself to meet her gaze, afraid that if I did, I might reveal something I wasn't ready to face. But Claire didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. She simply let the words hang in the air, a quiet invitation that no one dared to acknowledge fully. The moment stretched out, thick and heavy, settling over me like the smoke from the fire pit that clung to my hair long after I left. It lingered in my thoughts for days, an itch I couldn't scratch, a thought that refused to leave. A few days later, the same scene played out. The house was warm, the fire pit flickering softly in the distance, the wine flowing freely again. Only this time, there was a subtle shift in the energy. Claire poured the wine slower, deliberately, her gaze never leaving mine, almost as if she was measuring my every reaction. Each glance a calculated move in a game I didn't fully understand but was strangely drawn to. Mark was as distant as ever, his face buried in his phone, scrolling through something with absent disinterest. But Ethan was different. He wasn't speaking, wasn't laughing along with the others. Instead, his eyes were fixed on me, not with any unsettling intensity, but with a quiet kind of attention that made my skin feel warmer, made me more aware of myself in a way that I hadn't been in a long time. There was a softness to his gaze, as though he wasn't just seeing me, but was truly noticing me. For the first time in ages, I didn't want to look away. I tried to convince myself that it was harmless. Just a game. Just some harmless flirting, something that people did when they were bored, when they wanted something different. Something to break the monotony of everyday life. But it felt different this time. Every look, every touch, every casual brush of the hand, everything felt like it was leading somewhere. The air between us hummed with unspoken promises. It wasn't just playful banter, it was something more. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was real. I had been starving, not for sex, not for excitement or drama, but for connection. For someone to see me as more than a mother, more than a wife. I wanted to be seen as a person, as a woman, as someone with desires and needs and complexities beyond the roles I had spent so many years defining myself by. At that moment, I realized how long it had been since I had felt truly seen. It was like I had been living in a fog, drifting through the motions of life, and suddenly, I could breathe again. The invitation came again that night, but this time, it wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't an innocent offer. It was direct, simple, and unmistakable. Come to the hot tub if you can. No emojis, no coy phrasing, just the words, blunt and clear. It was an open door. But what lay on the other side was something I wasn't sure I was ready to confront. I stared at the screen, the words blurring slightly as my heart beat a little faster. The silence of the house around me felt overwhelming. Mark was snoring lightly in the next room, his back to me, just like every night. My children were upstairs, tucked into their beds, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in my mind. In the quiet, it felt like everything was amplified. The thrum of my pulse, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of the wind outside. I thought about it all, about the life I had built, the family I had raised, the years of memories I had shared with Mark. And yet, there was a growing sense of emptiness that clung to me, a quiet desperation that had been festering for far too long. The life I had fought so hard to create suddenly felt like it was slipping through my fingers. I wasn't sure if it was the life itself that was breaking or if it was something inside of me that had begun to crumble. And then, without thinking, without any plan or explanation, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I slipped out of bed, the coolness of the floor sending a shiver up my spine as I padded quietly down the hall. My heart was pounding now, the rhythm of my footsteps the only sound in the otherwise still house. I wrapped a robe around my shoulders, the fabric soft against my skin, and stepped out the door into the night. There was no turning back now. No words.
No excuses.
Just the steady pulse of my heart, guiding me towards something unknown. Something I hadn't allowed myself to even consider until now. The night air was cool, and as I walked toward the hot tub, every step felt like it was pulling me further away from the life I knew and closer to something entirely new. Something wild, something forbidden. And yet, in that moment, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. This was a choice, and I had made it. The night air was thick with the heat of the hot tub, the water lapping against my skin in gentle waves. As if it were trying to comfort me, the steam rose in delicate tendrils, curling and twisting around us like a veil, separating us from the world. Ethan and Claire were already there, their form silhouettes in the mist. They seemed to be waiting for me, though neither spoke or moved. It was as if they already knew, deep down, that something was about to shift between us. Claire sat at the far end, her hair pulled back into a neat bun, her face soft and open, her lips curving into that gentle smile she always wore when she was content. She was beautiful, in the way that people who are truly at peace radiate beauty. Ethan, on the other hand, was leaning back against the edge, his bare chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of his breath. His eyes were unreadable, distant in a way that made it impossible to know what was going on behind them. But that was part of his allure, wasn't it? The mystery. The quietness that seemed to echo from his every movement. I slipped into the tub beside them, not wanting to disturb the fragile tranquility of the moment. The warm water enveloped me, soothing the tension that had built up in my body over the past few days. We talked casually at first, like old friends. Nothing that really mattered. No weighty subjects. Just easy, light conversation, the kind that allows you to breathe a little deeper, to relax into the moment. Laughter bubbled up from all of us. The kind of laughter that made the world feel as though it had stopped spinning, if only for a brief moment. But then it happened. It was subtle at first. Ethan's leg brushed against mine. Just a flicker of contact. A touch so light it could have been an accident. But neither of us pulled away. Neither of us flinched or moved. It lingered for a heartbeat longer than it should have. Claire, always the perceptive one, was watching us. Her smile remained on her lips, but there was something more in her eyes. It wasn't a question. It was knowing. A quiet acceptance that the moment was unfolding, whether we were ready for it or not. The silence between us thickened. It wasn't the awkward, uncomfortable silence that can sometimes fill the room between strangers. No, this was different. It was heavy with something unspoken, something raw, but not in a way that demanded action. It wasn't wild. It wasn't loud. It wasn't the passionate, reckless affair I had secretly imagined in fleeting moments of weakness. It wasn't a flurry of desperate hands and frantic words. It was quiet. It was reverent, almost sacred, like we were all remembering something we had never needed to say aloud. The next morning, I crawled back into bed beside Mark. The sheets colder than usual, the space between us more significant than it had ever been. His back was turned to me just like it always was. The rhythm of our life had become a routine, a series of motions that we both went through without truly feeling anymore. I didn't say anything. Neither did he. We didn't need to speak. The silence between us was its own conversation. And yet, for the first time, I felt as though it wasn't enough. Something had shifted inside me, like a small crack had appeared in the wall I had built around myself. I didn't leave Mark. I didn't pack my things or make a dramatic exit. I stayed. I went through the motions, waking up, getting dressed, putting on the mask of normalcy that everyone expected me to wear. But inside, I was different. A piece of me, the part that had been hidden away for so long, was still with Ethan and Claire in that quiet, dangerous moment we had shared. I didn't know what it meant, what I was supposed to do with it, but I knew it was there. I wondered if Mark could see it. I wondered if anyone could. I didn't tell anyone about that night. Not the details. Not the way the steam had clung to our skin, or the way Ethan's touch had made my heart race in a way it hadn't in years. Not the way Claire had smiled knowingly, as if she had unlocked something inside me that I had forgotten was there. I didn't even know what to call it. Was it betrayal? Escape? Maybe both. It wasn't about lust. It wasn't about an affair in the traditional sense. It was something deeper, something more fragile. It was about remembering who I was. The person I had buried under the weight of expectations, of roles and routines. The woman who had once felt alive, who had once felt seen. The days continued to pass in a blur. We still had barbecues, the familiar sizzle of meat on the grill filling the air. We still had dinner parties, the clink of wine glasses, and the sound of laughter echoing in our home. The kids still ran around, chasing each other through the yard, their innocent joy a constant reminder of the life we had built together. The bills got paid, the laundry got folded. Everything was in its place. But something inside me had changed. I was different now. Not better. Not worse. Just different. I still washed the same dishes, still tucked the kids into bed, kissed their foreheads with the same tenderness as always. But the silence that had once been a constant background hum now felt louder. It was no longer just the hum of routine. It was the sound of a door that had cracked open, just a little, and I wasn't sure if I would ever be able to close it again. They wanted to watch, and I wanted to be seen. Not in a way that demanded attention, not in the way that people yearn to be noticed for their beauty or their achievements. No, this was different. It was the need to be seen for who I truly was, beneath the layers of responsibility and expectation. To be seen for my flaws, for my desires, for the parts of me that had long been hidden away. Maybe it wasn't so wrong after all.